Hey, I'm Pastor Gene. This is Kathy Self. We're going to be talking with her in a minute. And every week at Highpoint, we have a connection point where we try to connect with you about 1 or 4 ways that you can grow in your spiritual walk. And so this morning, we kind of have a very unique presentation to make. A few months back, it was actually about 1.5 years ago, the board started thinking that we want to beautify the church with modern art. And so what we were wanting to do was think of a way to celebrate the resurrection, what Christ has done for us, but also complement the modern architecture of the church. And so what the board did is they commissioned a local artist right here, Kathy Self, part of our Highpoint family, to make a series of paintings that are going to be down this long hallway right here. You probably already see the lights. And so what I want to do is I want to start with this question to help you connect with this. How many of you here today, you have lost a loved one that you miss dearly? How many of you here are in that category? Great. You've lost a loved one that means something to you. And so this is going to pique your interest because what we're going to be doing is presenting these different paintings in memorial of loved ones, those here in the church. And so the purpose of the project, as I said, is to really celebrate the meaning of the resurrection. So you might be saying, well, Pastor Gene, what are Stations of the Cross? Well, many years ago, the Catholic Church was the one that initiated Stations of the Cross. They had 14 of them, but only half, Kathy, were actually being able to be traced back to biblical narratives and things that happened. And then Pope John Paul authorized a new version called Scriptural Way of the Cross that took all the way up to the crucifixion, but left out the resurrection. And then a few years later in the Philippines, an evangelical version of Stations of the Cross from born-again Christians emerged that had 15 stations, including the resurrection of Christ. And so why the resurrection is important, why Easter is important, Paul says that the fact that Jesus Christ rose from the dead guarantees every single person who is a person of faith who dies will one day be resurrected. And I am really looking forward to that day. That's a great hope even for Rhonda and I, who lost our 23-year-old son. And so what we're wanting to do is we are going to be commissioning. Kathy has already started many of these. And so Kathy, I want to find out, first of all, I love your style. You have many different various styles of modern art. But what makes you so passionate about painting? What inspires you to paint?
Well, pretty much everything and anything inspires me. It can be walking in the woods, seeing the leaves changing up in the mountains.
Yes.
It can be reading a poem, reading scripture, reading the headlines when I feel I need to respond to something that's happening in the world around me. I paint. It's my go-to response. It's how I pray. It's how I worship. It's how I process life.
Now, we kind of gave you a very difficult assignment because we said one of our passions at Highpoint is to clothe old truths in new light. And so we asked you to embrace a style of art that would be something with 1 foot in the past and 1 foot into the future. And so you have an artistic style that you used for these. Tell us the term that you used to explain this and a little bit about that style.
Yes, the style I've adopted for this series is called illuminated mosaics. And I took inspiration from the ancient mosaic murals that the early church created almost 2,000 years ago. And then I took inspiration from illuminated manuscripts that were created during the medieval times, and they had very vibrant jewel tone colors. And then I outlined the main concepts of the paintings with black, like a stained glass window. So that's like the historical context. And then present day, I drew inspiration from how all our digital images are based with pixels, which are like teeny tiny squares. So I've got that square motif in every single painting.
And you've been working on this for 1.5 years now. You've got 9 done. Actually, you're on the 10th, right? So
yes,
tell us about the one you're working on right now.
I am working on the one where it's the beginning of the crucifixion, and my goal is to include I want to include the placard that was hung above Jesus, where it said, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, in 3 languages, because I feel that's really important, because the Latin language was the language of government and authority. It was in Greek, and that was the language of commerce, and it was the common language of the day. And then it was in Aramaic, and that was the religious language for the
Yes.
Jews. And I think of how Jesus' work on the cross covers all those different domains.
You and I have, as many here, this project means something to you and I because we have lost loved ones in the past 2 years. You lost a newborn granddaughter.
Yes, we did.
And she is going to be listed among the names that this is a memorial to. How has that affected you painting these, knowing that Nora is going to be memorialized through these paintings?
Makes me cry. And I just think of the impact of our loved ones who are with the Lord right now. And I just pray that something of her sweet life is revealed in this. And I draw near to God through this loss of our beautiful grandbaby.
Yes.
And the hope that God has all of this. And no tear is wasted as we mourn our loved ones. God gathers all those tears and he records our wanderings in his book. So like when your heart is wandering because you are mourning, you are deep mourning, that's okay. And I think of how Jesus, through his work on Good Friday, he validates every experience of our life, whether it's rejoicing or it's sorrow. And you know what it's like to mourn the next generation.
Yes.
And part of me is like, I'm so grateful. We had 7 hours with our grandbaby. Charlie was able to dedicate her. And typically grandparents don't get to spend the entire grandchild's life with them.
Yes.
But with our baby granddaughter, she was with us for 7 hours, and every hour was like a decade. And we will always treasure that. And some of that longing is in these paintings.
What's really neat about this project, those of you've probably seen, we wanted to wait till the 9th installment was done before we introduced it to the church, but you have probably seen all the lighting that is installed here on this side wall, this long wall, and they are all going to be along there, and it's really going to tell the story of redemption from Christ's early time to all the way to the resurrection. And I know that Ron and I, despite the grief that we may feel loved ones, our hope, Paul says, our blessed hope in Titus, is that we will see our believing loved ones again.
Absolutely.
And that's the great hope of the resurrection, and that is where it is going to end. So we're inviting you, the board and I, Kathy, those of I, some of you have seen this on Facebook and have already made contributions, but we're going to leave this open for a few weeks here. And if you would like to add the name of a loved one to that plaque that'll be at the end that will tell that story, all you need to do is write a check for $350 to Highpoint Church. We've kind of used that as a way to gauge the total cost of the project. And then you need to just designate Stations of the Cross and then write very clearly and legibly the name of your loved one that you have lost. And you can do that online. There's also a way for highpointchurch.us/stations, highpointchurch.us/stations, and you can do that, and that will be there, and that's going to be such a powerful thing to see that. Kathy, I love your work. I love the passion that you put in it. And I know when you walk into a modern building like this that looks more like a loft that you'd see in downtown Denver, that was a challenge for you to take in the bright colors of the building, but also embrace something of our Christian heritage. It's amazing. Some of the greatest art we celebrate today in Rome and in Europe was commissioned by the church. And some of the greatest music we know today was commissioned by the church. So I sure appreciate Kathy, her heart, and her passion. Will you give her a hand and let her know how much we appreciate her?